Okay, in this video, I'm going to break down some of the differences between the high-level hitting pattern, or the HLP, and a normal conventional swing. And just to try to get you familiar with the differences between the two, what makes the high-level pattern work, and what will ultimately break it if you're trying to use it, but you use it incorrectly. So maybe the first thing I'll talk about is the primary difference between the two patterns. And really what that comes down to is how your hips interact in your swing, okay? So for a normal conventional swing where a batter is swinging for power, what you'll usually find is they generate a lot of the power with their upper body, and yeah, their hips do turn as they're swinging, but in essence they're being dragged through the contact zone instead of being a driver of their body into the contact zone. And what I mean is kind of like this. So if I'm here and I'm going to pull or push into contact like this, my power source is up here. I'm going to come down like this, and my hips will kind of get drug along into the zone. I'll try to show it right here. So as I come from up here and I come down into contact, yeah, my hips turn a little bit, but not in a way they're adding a lot of force. So as I push down into contact, they'll come, but in essence, I'm dragging them into the hitting zone. They're not really bringing a lot to my mechanic when I do this. So they're not really generating power, and they're also not really giving me any ability to adjust. So that's what you would call like the conventional swing, where I pull down through, and yeah, my hips turn, but I'm dragging them through, okay? The key thing about the HLP is that this hip action is fundamentally different. And what I mean by that is, in the HLP, the way the hips work is they are actually pulling your body through your swing, okay? And at the same time, they're offering you the ability to adjust the pitch location while they're driving you into contact. So let me try to show you a little bit more about how that works. So some of you have heard a little bit about coil and what does it mean when you get coil in your swing. What does it do for your swing? Well, when you're in the high-level pattern, what coil does is it's the mechanism that turns your body through the zone, but only if you launch rearward. So let me try to show you this visually, okay? So I'm gonna coil right here. I'm in a stance, and I'm talking completely about my rear hip, okay? So I'm gonna be in my stance, and I'm gonna coil my rear hip on top of my femur, okay? And I'm not gonna go into super detail on that right now. I'll make another video to try to explain a little bit more about coil and how you can do it wrong. But the key point is I need to keep my femur straight, pointed this way into the camera, and then I'm gonna pull or turn backwards, kind of like my belly button going towards the catcher, but it's focused on my pelvis, not my belly. My pelvis is gonna turn back while my femur stays straight. And when I do that, I'm coiled in my rear hip. Okay? So there's a quick way to tell that you're coiled. One is to get here, get in the coiled position, and if I just lift up this foot, you'll see my body just uncoils me. When I do that, so you just kind of spin through. So that's a quick test to tell if I'm coiled. If you don't keep your femur straight and just turn back like this, it might look kind of the same, but if I lift up my leg, nothing will happen. There's no coil in my hip. There's no mechanical thing going on in my hip. So maybe your question is, so what does that mean? So why do you need that coil? What does it do? Okay, so here's the key movement pattern that makes the HLP pattern work, okay? So we've all heard a million times, your glutes are the strongest muscle in your body. You know, they do so much for your core, they offer all the strength. Well, when I swing the normal way, I contend my glutes aren't doing a whole lot because I'm kind of pushing my way into contact. When I swing in the high level pattern though, it's different. So, and I'll get into the mechanics of this in more detail later, but just on a higher level, mechanically, when I swing with a high level pattern, I'm launching my barrel and myself rearward, okay? And you'll notice my hips start to turn when I do that. That's because when I get in my stance, I coil a little bit. So this process of coiling, what it does is when you just do a normal hip hinge and hip extension, obviously my hips don't turn at all, okay? That's my glutes that do that, okay? When I hip hinge and I unhinge my hips, like to jump or do whatever, that's glutes, okay? So you'd probably say, what does this movement have to do in a hitting pattern? Well, that's where coil comes into play, okay? So yes, glutes do this. They just extend your hip. So if I get hip hinge and then I coil my rear hip, I've created a misalignment in my hip right now, okay? My femur was straight, and I twisted my pelvis back, and when I did that, I created a misalignment, okay? So when I extend my hip with coil, it's gonna force my leg to turn, just like you would see a rear leg drive you into your hitting mechanism. Looks a little bit like this. So I get here, I'll start in this pose so you can see it. I'm coiled back, okay? So if I start to straighten my hip out, okay? So fire my glutes and let my hip extend. When I go back, you see how my leg will start to turn. And the more I go back, the more it turns my leg in until my hip, my pelvis, and my hip joint is straight again, okay? So when I'm here and I extend my hips, it straightens my hip joint out, okay? But when I get my stance and I coil, well now, when I extend my hip, my body has to mechanically resolve this twisting action that's going into it. And the only way it can do it, my foot's grounded, is to turn my femur and get it realigned with my hip. So I'm here, I coil, I'm gonna hold that coil, I'm gonna keep coiling backwards the whole time. I'm not doing anything to go forward, okay? And I'm just gonna go back and turn my barrel, and you'll see this brings my rear leg all the way around into contact. So I'm here, I'm coiled, I'm gonna turn my barrel back and pull back with my body, and it just turned my hip all the way into contact. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense that when you coil, you create this misalignment in your hip joint. And because it's misaligned, it can't simply just extend like it normally would. It has to resolve that misalignment. And that resolution comes in the form of rotating you into the contact zone. Okay? So that's, more than anything else, the most important element of the high-level pattern, okay, is that it will make your rear hip automatically work in the swing pattern, okay? So when you swing this way, sometimes you'll see kids that swing around their body, their hips don't move, and then you'll say, hey, you're not, so-and-so's not using their hips, you gotta turn your hips, so then you'll get one of these where they turn their hips, okay? You can force that movement, but it's exactly that. When you force it, not only are you not using your glutes, because when you use this movement pattern, you're using a different set of muscles that just rotate you and turn you around. Whereas when I'm hip hinged and I'm here and I'm going to fire back, it's exactly the same kind of power you'd have if you were jumping vertically. I'm here and I'm going to snap back, and that hip will just snap you through, okay? So the coil makes that happen. The other thing sorry about that. The other thing that the coil does is that by coiling, it removes all of the slack out of the rear hip, okay? So if I were standing here, we've all heard the old way of turning through the zone. You'll hear somebody say, squish the bug. It's been around forever, totally wrong. So if I'm a kid, I'm in the batter's box here, and somebody says, you're not turning your hips, squish the bug. Well, if I just turn my leg in, nothing happened with my hips. Now my leg might have turned in, just like all the pro ball players, but my hips didn't work right. The reason that didn't work is because I've got slop in my hip joint. Now, I'm not a proponent of squish the bug. That's not how a high level pattern works. But the point I'm trying to make is when you take the slack out of your rear hip, now there's no room for that to happen. So now if I were to just turn my leg, it turns my hips. It has to, because I pulled all the slop out of my joint, and now when my rear leg turns, it just takes my whole body with it. And what you'll notice is if you play around with it, it's a pretty effortless move. Okay, so when you're here, and when the leg starts to turn you, it's almost like weightlessness. You don't really have to force it. It's just going to automatically turn you through. So again, squish the bug, again, not a thing for the HLP, not something that we do. The way it works in the HLP is you coil and you launch rearward and it snaps. So I'll try to show it here with the side view. Maybe that will help a little bit. So again, I'm going to get here. I'm hip hinged. I'm straight forward. Now I'm going to coil my rear hip like this. So we all see that in normal hitting stances. I get hip hinge, I'm back. So when I launch rearward, I'm going to straighten my hip, and it's going to turn my leg into the contact zone. So that's the general process of what's going on in the rear hip, and that's the key to everything for making this work. Okay. There's another part that doing this movement with the rear hip in the high level pattern, another way that it helps your swing is in regards to how we go into contact to hit a ball. Okay. So let me take a second to kind of explain the differences between a normal swing and the high level pattern and how they move into contact for a moving ball. Okay. So in a traditional swing, this is my contention, so feel free to challenge it, but I've done this a lot. It's pretty right. If I'm going to swing with a normal upper body swing where I pull my barrel into the contact zone, which is what a lot of people do, when you take kids to do exit velocity training, and you're trying to max out that speed, you will almost always get an upper body powered swing out of it because it will bring a lot of power when I come down like that into the ball, okay? But here's what kills you with that kind of mechanic in a game. I argue that if I'm going to pull as hard as I can into contact to generate exit velocity, I can't start to do this move unless I know exactly where my bat's going to go. Okay? This is huge. So what I'm saying is, you can't start to do this and then come down there and get that ball easily. You might have a small range to adjust in, but it's not a lot. Okay? So for the most part, if you've got this high EV swing, it's basically an athleticism-based swing. Okay? You're trying to be a lot stronger and faster with your bat than the pitcher. The stronger you are, the faster you are with your bat, the more time it buys you, because you need a lot of time, because you can't easily adjust after you've launched your swing. So you're here, you gotta wait till you like it, then you gotta wait until you know where it's gonna be, and then boom, you attack it. So if you make contact, it goes really far. All right? No doubt that swing crushes BP all day long. But the problem is, when it goes into the game, it doesn't always make solid contact. How rare is it that we pull that swing and we just drive the thing, forever, or hit a home run? It just doesn't happen very often, okay? So that's the killer of the traditional swing, is that pull into contact. You gotta start picking your position a lot earlier, okay? What makes the high level pattern special, the HLP, is that when I'm doing the HLP, I'm not bringing power down to the ball, okay? When I do the HLP, I'm just launching my bat this way. I don't care where the ball's at. it's up in the zone, low in the zone, in, out, doesn't matter. My launch is always the same. I'm going to be here, I'm coiled, and I'm just going to launch rearward regardless. Doesn't matter where it's at. Okay? And because I do that, the high level pattern, I'm able to adjust as I swing. So I didn't have to wait for the ball to see it and know where I wanted to go to attack it. I don't have to wait that long. For the high level pattern, I can let the ball get close to me. A lot closer than if I was going to pick my spot and attack it, because I don't need to know exactly where I'm swinging to launch this mechanic. Okay? If the ball's low out, I'm launching the same way, and I'm going to come out here and get it. And sorry, the reason I'm using this is it's going to go into my barrel turn instruction in the next video. But if the ball's high in the zone, same thing. I'll launch rearward, and you'll see that my rear hip just adjusts me, okay? So this is, I'll talk about the two ways that your body adjusts in a high level pattern, okay? So the first part is, how do I adjust high and low, okay? Well, your rear hip does that for you. So this is just another part of what's special about the high level pattern, is because all you have to do is to launch rearward, and your eyes are seeing where the pitch is at. So if that ball is low and out, your brain will naturally tilt you more over your rear leg. Okay, so maybe that was actually probably the right view. If I'm here and the ball is low and out and I launch rearward, my body's gonna keep tilting my hips so they get on plane with that pitch. You don't have to do it. It's not like a muscle memory issue. Certainly not like this, where I push into the zone that doesn't allow my hips to transition. When I'm here, it's just my pelvis will tilt over my rear hip in the line. If the ball's up in the zone, you'll just notice that I don't get any lateral tilt in my pelvis. So it's here, it's up in the zone, just very little tilt, okay? But the mechanic's always the same. It's always a rearward launch, and that drives my hips through automatically. Don't even have to think about it. All I have to do is launch rearward, my hips will work, okay? Ball's low and out, same thing. I'm here, I'm coiled up. All I gotta do, launch rearward, and my body will turn me that way with my hips, okay? So my hip is doing the adjusting, okay? For the angle of the bat into the zone. Straight for high pitch, or angle down for low pitch. You'll notice my hips just turn, or they just tilt laterally to get to whatever pitch it is. All right, if it's up in the zone, they'll just stay straight. And it'll be right here. So what's nice is my arms in the high level pattern are not adding power into contact. So they're not actively attacking a place, right? Because if I'm gonna swing an axe and attack a tree, I gotta know where I'm gonna hit it, okay? I have to have that place mapped out in my head ahead of time, okay? This type of a swing doesn't lend itself well to, oh, and come down there and get it. You wreck all your power, right? No power, there's no benefit in that swing. So the arms roll in this high level pattern is they adjust to the ball in and out, okay? So again, if I'm, maybe this is the right angle, I launch rearward, okay? Whoa, and the ball's out, right? My body's, it's low and out. My body's already started adjusting this way. That's your brain's just doing that. You don't even have to do it. It's kind of a no teach. But you are gonna have to go out and get that ball, okay? Because your arms aren't jerking their way through the zone, all your arms have to do is as you turn back, they just let it out, okay? Not down across my body. They're just gonna let themselves out. And you just let your arms come out and you attack that zone. Just like if the ball's down and in, when I go here and I turn it, they can pull in, tuck into my body, okay? So your arms are just going in and out. Okay, sorry about that. Obviously I cut the video. I started to ramble on a little bit more about some of the frames and the contact and the time, but I don't know that fits very well into this video. I don't want to make it overly complicated. Plus, I was getting a little hot to pull over, so I had to pull that off. I think the next thing that I wanted to cover just in a little bit of detail are the things that kind of will break the high-level pattern, all right? So I've spent a lot of time talking about differences between a traditional swing and what happens in the high-level swing. So let me tell you a couple things and a couple ways that when you try to learn this pattern and you do it, you can break things if you're not careful, and then just things to watch for, okay? So obviously what I talked about in this high-level pattern is learning how to turn the barrel and launch rearward in a contact. So what goes along with that is if I start to turn rearward and then I decide to attack down at the ball, it will break this mechanic. It happens kind of frequently, actually, so this is something that we always want to be aware of, okay? So you'll be working with a kid or somebody's up to swing, up the bat, and they're going to swing. They're here, they're loaded up, they start to launch like this. You'll see their rear hip starts to work, okay? But from this point, you'll see that they start to pull in the contact. That'll wreck everything. So I'm here, I'm coiled, I launch rearward, and then from here, I start to pull in the contact. And you'll notice my hip just died at that point, right? So as long as I'm here and I keep pulling back, my hip will keep turning me through the zone, okay? And that happens automatically, okay? And that's what we want. But if I'm here and I launch rearward and I get to this point, and maybe I'm getting beat by the pitch because I didn't give myself a lot of time, and I start to attack this way, you lose all of your hip, okay? And it stinks that you broke the high-level pattern, but it also stinks that you lost your adjustability into the zone, because once I start to attack here, I'm not able to do this easily. At the same rate as I start to attack this way, my arms aren't able to adjust very well. You kind of morph back into that traditional swing mechanic where you're putting power into the ball. So that's one of the biggest ways you'll break this swing mechanic, is you're here, you're coiled, you launch rearward, and then you finish down into the ball and add power into the ball. Your hips will die, okay? I hope that's pretty clear. Let's see, another way that's going to start to break is if you bleed out your coil, okay? So in the beginning of the video, I talked about hip extension and how this works. So if there's no coil in my hip and I launch rearward, nothing happens, right? There's no rotary movement. So for it to work right, I need to get coiled, and now when I launch back, I get that movement, that turn through the zone, part of that backwards movement. Now, if I bleed out the coil in my leg, okay, and this is a big, big problem that we see with kids that try to learn this, when you try to add momentum back in your swing, when you bleed the coil out of your leg, it can't work very, very well anymore. So if I get fully coiled, and fully coiled's not a lot of degrees, I mean, it's like 10 degrees, something like that. It's not a lot of turn to max out your hip joint. So if I go here and I keep pulling back all the way when I swing, you'll notice my hips turn real deep into the zone. Coil up. So my hips are really far into the zone at that point. If I coil and then I shift forward, now I bleed the coil out of my rear hip. Now when I launch back, you'll notice this is as far as I can turn my hips with hip extension. You see, I've lost all of that range of movement. I can still turn my hips with my body, but that's a whole different mechanic, right? That's the more traditional way to swing. So I get here, coiled up, I shift forward to swing, I bled out my rear hip, my foot's pulling off the ground, I launch rearward, hips are done. If the hips are done, you're going to have to push into contact the rest of the way, okay? So those are the two big things that I see when people start to learn the mechanic that will really start to break things, okay? Kids have all the great intentions to launch rearward, but as soon as they start to pull, it's done. This just goes back to a normal athletic-based swing mechanic. So maybe I'll talk a little bit more in, you know, as you start to learn some of these mechanics, some of the things that really help are to do snap-stop swings where I'm here, I'm coiled, and I'm gonna snap all the way through. So what you're kind of wondering is, what's the snap and where does it stop? I'm gonna make another video in a minute to talk more about barrel turn, but generally speaking, the snap stops when my rear hip's maxed out. Okay, so it's not an arms mechanic where I'm stopping it with my wrist and my arms. I'm not turning and then stopping here. The snap's here. Okay, here, coiled. I'm gonna turn all the way back until my hip's locked out. So it's my hip that's stopping me. So that's something that's nice to do. Once you look at the other video, you learn how to turn the barrel, break it down a little bit better. You can also learn how to turn and do these snap stops, and then you can take it a little bit further. You can do snap stop and let your arms come out further, and then if you want, you can actually swing with no rollover at all and let your hands just come all the way out here, and you'll notice I'm not rolling over. So usually that need to roll over starts to break some kids down. They'll get to here, and then they'll just feel the need to roll over. So these snap stops are great mechanisms just to feel, this is what we want into contact. I want my rear hip driving me into contact. I just want, as a person who's hitting the ball, I want the only thing that you're thinking about is rearward launch and just doing this. Your brain and body will take care of the rest. You don't have to worry about contact. You do need to practice it, but you'll find that all you need to focus on is, when do I go back? And your hips at that point will become fully automatic. I think that's all I've got right now for this stage of the video. I'm going to try to add on a few more videos to explain barrel turn, maybe go into more detail on coil, and start to kind of break this down a little bit more. But at least as an overview for the high-level pattern, I hope that explains the mechanic, what makes it different, what makes it successful, and you know, why is it a better mechanic than just a traditional athletic-based swing. So I'm new at this, not making a lot of videos. If you want, add some comments. I'll respond with comments, at least the polite ones. And we'll see if I need to help you with anything or offer you any more videos or things for you to look at on your own. All right, thanks a lot.